This video is going to talk about two different types of probability. The first one that we're going to talk about is theoretical probability. So theoretical probability is what we would expect to happen mathematically in different situations. So just like the other video, theoretical probability can be thought of as the number of possible ways an outcome can happen over the total number of outcomes. So I've got a spinner here that I'm going to show you some examples. So we're going to show the theoretical probability of spinning the different colors. So we'll start with the theoretical probability TP of red. So if you look at this spinner, you will see that there is one section that is red. So the top number on our fraction is going to be 1. And then the total number of outcomes is how many different places could the spinner land. So in total, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections. So there's 8 possible outcomes. So the theoretical probability of landing on red is 1 in 8. If you divide 1 by 8, you will get 0.125. And then remember, we can write that as a percent by multiplying that by 100. That would move the decimal 2 spots to the right. So the chance of landing on red is 12.5%. Not very high. We would say that this is unlikely. The theoretical probability of landing on blue, let's say. And yellow is going to be the same, so I'll just do theoretical probability of blue. There are 2 spots out of 8. Okay. Now we can divide. 2 divided by 8 is 0.25, which makes sense because 2 out of 8 is the same as 1 out of 4, or 1/4, which would be 25%. Still unlikely, but more likely than landing on red. And then finally, let's look at the theoretical probability of green. So there are 3 green out of 8. So then we can divide 3 by 8. We get 0.375, which would be 37.5%. Okay. Hopefully this brings back what theoretical probability is. We can use theoretical probability to make predictions. So we might say what color are you most likely to land on or least likely to land on. You can prove it using the math. The other type of probability that we need to know about is experimental probability. So if theoretical probability is what we think or expect to happen, the experimental probability is what actually happens if you go through and do a probability experiment, like spinning this spinner 10 times. So experimental probability can be written as the number of times your outcome occurred over the total number of trials. So if you think about this spinner problem. So we had the theoretical probability of spinning red as 1 out of 8. And that was 0.125 or 12.5%. So we can use that to predict what we think would happen. Let's say if we did our experiment 10 times, how many times do you think we would land on red? If we actually did the experiment 10 times. Well, it has a 1 in 8 chance, so maybe somewhere between 1 and 2 times. So let's say, for example, I spun the spinner 10 times, and it landed on red twice. I would write the experimental probability of red as 2 over 10, which is equal to 0.2 or 20%. And we would expect experimental probability to sometimes be a little bit different than the theoretical probability. That's okay. That's because probability also has an element of chance. So chance means that some things happen that we can't necessarily predict. But we would expect that if the spinner was a fair spinner, that we would have a percent fairly close to what our theoretical probability would be. I would have lots of questions if you spun the spinner 10 times and 9 out of 10 times you landed on red. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So you can kind of see how the two are related. So theoretical probability is the math behind what we think would happen, and then experimental probability is what actually happened. What percent of the spins landed on your desired outcome, or the color that you were wanting to look at.